get into our waiver wire target draft. As always, we do a draft format here with alternating picks. Dave's going to go first. And with all of these players, we're selecting players that are available in at least 60% of leagues. And honestly, most of the players in today's waiver wire draft are going to be available in roughly 90% of leagues because it's a little thin out there. But those of you that are in deeper leagues, you have a lot of injuries, you're trying to replace players, get some spot starts, we got you here. So Dave, why don't you kick us off?
Just talked about him, but Caleb Williams is definitely
Yeah.
somebody that should be picked up now, and I know a lot of people picked him up before his bye week when he was looking good. He strung together a handful of nice games there. He had 23.6 points, then 29.6 points. Then he had the bye week, and the offense has just come out looking flat ever since. But now we've seen 2 games with Thomas Brown as the offensive coordinator and the play caller there. And I don't want to get too excited because we see this a lot of times when there's a change in play caller or a change in offensive philosophy where it kind of looks good for a couple of weeks and then gets figured out. But I think that they're doing um, good things for Caleb Williams. I mean, you look right now, they were asking him to do so much early in the year. They're asking him to go through his progressions and they were running these really complex plays. And now it's just kind of hey, we're going to drop a screen pass. And if we don't, we're going to give you one read. And if that's not there, go make something special happen. And sometimes he does that with his legs. Sometimes he does it by extending a play and making a throw downfield. But they've kind of, I don't want to say dumb down the offense because I think that has a negative connotation to it, but they've made it easier for Caleb Williams to succeed. And now we're seeing him do a lot of the things that he did at USC. First of all, the rushing is there, something we didn't see a lot of early in the season. He's got 103 rushing yards over the last 2 weeks. But when they allow him to make those plays out of the structure of the play, Alfredo, I don't know how much you got to see yesterday. Did you see that sideline throw that he made to
Yes.
DeAndre Swift?
Yes.
Maybe
Phenomenal.
I'm looking through this with, navy and orange glasses here. Was that one of the best throws of the season? I mean, that was genuinely just mind blowing. His ability to run away from a defender on the move, jumps up in the air, and just floats a ball between 2 defenders right into DeAndre Swift's hands, who didn't even know the ball was coming. Like DeAndre Swift's head is on a swivel and his hands are out in front of him, and then it just hits him in that just beautiful. And like we know Caleb Williams can do these things, and now it's finally starting to happen. And when you look at his schedule, that's when things get a little bit weird. We got 5 weeks left in the fantasy football season, and it's the matchup Chicago has are the Lions, the 49ers, the Vikings, the Lions, and the Seahawks. So while there are some
Rough.
tough defenses, they're also good offenses. So, you can kind of paint your own picture here. Is it going to be shootout opportunities, trailing and loading up garbage points opportunities? Either way, I do like these matchups for Caleb Williams, somebody who's just starting to play a little bit looser over the last few weeks. So I think now, we looked at Caleb Williams as somebody that you just drop. I think he is very much so now back in the top 10, top 12 streaming discussion on a weekly basis.
That throw that you're talking about was a holy bleep throw where you just see it happen. And a part of me was thinking he's just going to throw it out of bounds. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Or it's getting picked off. Like, oh, what a boneheaded throw. And then you see the bucket that he's able to drop that pass into. And that's exactly what I said. The ball falls into DeAndre Swift's hands, and I went, holy bleep.
Yeah.
I mean, Caleb, he looked great. He looked great. And that's why I say it's sort of a moral victory for the Bears because he looked great. The offense looked like it had some juice, right? Like this
Mhm.
team. And you said that you didn't want to exactly say that the Bears are dumbing it down, but I think there is something to be said for making players feel comfortable and making plays simple. That's what has worked for Bo Nix and the Broncos is just make the plays simple, let them do what they're comfortable doing. And even for Caleb, if that means, creating out of the pocket, then yeah, that's what he's going to do. That's what he gets, comfortable doing. And we try so hard, not we, I mean, the royal we, NFL coaches try so hard to do this thing where they want to take players and fit the square peg into the round hole. And I think for as much crap as we give them, Sean Payton is showing just let players do what they're good at and draft the players that fit your team and stop trying to force something that's not there. And hoping that Caleb Williams is on that track now for the Bears.
And the one other thing I'll say, obviously I'm a little bit biased here. I try my best to hide my bias or remove it from my process, but I do watch every Bears game closer than I'm watching other teams. I watch all the games, but the Bears are one of the ones that I'm really kind of invested in. And what I saw early in the year is that Caleb Williams was sailing almost, or no, I'm sorry, I have this flip flop. Early in the season, he was underthrowing, and that's why we saw the interceptions early. And then he went through this kind of, shell shocked phase where he threw so many interceptions and also had a lot of dropped interceptions that then he started sailing every single ball that he was pushing downfield. And now it feels like he's finally kind of calibrated, where he was short arming, then he was sailing. These last few weeks, he has fit some balls into windows that just blow my mind, where I see like three defenders around a player, and Caleb Williams just zips one right where only his guy can get it. So seems like the game's starting to slow down a little bit, and we want to see rookies performing at their ceiling in week one, but that's just not how it goes. And now we're starting to see that ceiling for Caleb Williams come to fruition over these last few weeks.
That laser to Keenan Allen, by the way, is I think one
Yes.
of those throws that you're talking about where I was like, "Oh, that's
Hmm.
big." Oh, no, it's not. It when you start to
Had one
see
to
stuff
Cole
like
Kmet
that.
last week too. There was the same thing where it's just like he's making these throws that I'm just my jaw drops, and I'm like, how did he fit that in there?
Statistically, he's not that far off from these other guys, Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. And I mean, all the quarterbacks are along the same lines right now. And I think the trajectory for Caleb feels better than Jaden Daniels at the moment. Um, Maybe not Bo Nix, which is
Yeah.
surprisingly, I think maybe even the front runner for rookie of the year at this point, which is nuts to say. And the schedule remains pretty easy going forward for them. But the Bears offense, man, they're looking good. And that's where I'm going to go with my pick here, the second pick in this waiver wire draft. Roschon Johnson, running back for the Bears. He's available in 83% of leagues. Caleb in this offense, they're on the upswing. What we saw so far and what we've been seeing throughout the season is that Roschon Johnson is getting those goal line touches. He's getting a lot of the short yardage situations as well. But this has been magnified times 10 with Thomas Brown now as the offensive coordinator. And interestingly enough, Dave, this last game, Roschon Johnson, all of the third down plays
Hmm.
all of the third down plays, nearly all of the 2-minute drills. If the Bears are going to be in these tough matchups where they're going to have to pass a lot and constantly be trying to score quickly against these teams or they're always trailing, we could end up seeing a lot of Roschon Johnson being out on the field, which is interesting because, I mean, DeAndre Swift is himself a very good receiver, but Roschon Johnson is the guy who is a very, very good pass blocker. And while we say there's no points, obviously, for pass blocking, he's
Get you
the
on the
kind of
field.
guy that teams want out there. Exactly. And so
Hmm.
he's going to get a lot of those checkdowns if something's not there. And him being on the field for those valuable touches, the passes and the touchdowns, it's going to be invaluable for him as a player. I know that we maybe haven't seen this crazy usage from him just yet, but all of the background numbers are there. And just if we're going to look at the forefront, 6 touchdowns in 8 games, I mean, we haven't quite seen the usage, but the snaps are going up. The snaps are there for the right type of plays. We're getting the touchdowns. And like you said, it's going to be a tough schedule going forward, but I think that's going to lend to a lot more passing with Roschon Johnson being on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking right now on PFF. Everybody's going to have their opinion on PFF grades, whatever. But
Yeah.
pass blocking grades, there's only one player on the Bears who is graded as a worse pass blocker than DeAndre Swift, and that's their backup guard who has played 4 snaps this season. I mean, DeAndre Swift is absolutely a liability, and that's what Roschon Johnson was drafted for. Like, if you look at his prospect profile, what he did in college, he was a great pass blocker and struggled a little bit in that respect last year, but he seems to be getting better and better. Um, the
The
only other
idea
thing,
that a
yeah,
guard is a worse pass blocker than DeAndre Swift is really funny.
a guard that played 4 snaps, mind you, Doug Kramer.
Yeah.
Not a guy that we've seen a
Okay.
lot of this year.
It's just
But
a fun concept.
I know, yeah, and DeAndre Swift has been objectively bad. This is on a 1 to 100 scale, and DeAndre Swift is graded at 27.1. I don't have time to look up right now how that grades among all NFL running backs, but I'd be willing to guess bottom 10 percentile. And we talked about this a lot this offseason, right? Like that DeAndre Swift is good, but that he always, every single year, regardless of the team, regardless of the coaching staff, always finds himself just letting the ability and opportunity slip between his fingers. And we're seeing that now. Roschon Johnson keeps carving out a bigger and bigger role. And I think we're at the point now where we saw, rookie year DeAndre Swift was ceding goal line touches to Adrian Peterson. Then over the next 2 years, he was ceding touches to Jamal Williams. Then last year, he's ceding goal line touches to Jalen Hurts. And now in Chicago, he's ceding goal line touches to Roschon Johnson. I think we have to change the conversation from like, why is DeAndre Swift always losing out on goal line touches to, hey, DeAndre Swift is pretty bad near the goal line. You look at week 2 when they gave him a goal line touch and he picked up negative 14 yards. That's why Roschon Johnson is getting these touches. It's not because DeAndre Swift, deserves them and they're just like, rudely taking the touches from him. It's because he's not good at the goal line and Roschon Johnson is. So anytime they get within the 5 yard line, just expect to see Roschon out there.
The stats surrounding DeAndre Swift are some of the funniest stats that we've come across this year.
I mean, there's an
Losing
electric
14
fence at the goal
yards.
line for him. Like he gets to the 1 yard line and he's just like, okay, I'm going to lay down and give the ball to Roschon.
That would have been better than losing 14 yards. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
By the way, Thomas Brown, like for those who don't know, was a running back in the NFL. He was a running back at the University of Georgia, and if he's going to be making changes here to this offense, yeah, it would not surprise me that he's going with the guy that does everything out of the backfield. Runs better, not runs better, excuse me, but he can run, he can catch, and he can pass block. And there you see this often. Coaches that were players take pride in the players that do the tough things that don't get any glory. Like Dan Campbell is one of those guys that absolutely loves tight ends that block, and then
Mm.
you see him utilize these tight ends constantly. It He was that tight end that blocked. So yeah, Thomas Brown. It would not surprise me if we start to see a
I'm
lot more Roschon
curious.
Johnson.
Dan Campbell, remind me, how did he utilize DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams?
Hmm, hmm,
Because we're
not
seeing,
great.
you know, we're doing it all over again on a new team.
Yep. All right, let's go to your next pick, Dave. Pick number 2 for you. Pick 3 overall.
Pick number 2 for me is Demario Douglas, and I feel like we've talked about him a lot.
Yep.
Snip, snap, pick him up, drop him, pick him up, drop him. Well, I guess it's time to pick him up again. He's looked good over the last couple of weeks, and this is a tough offense to get a read on because Drake May, typically what we see from rookies is they just kind of like laser in on one guy that they want to force feed the ball to, and Drake May has not been doing that. He's spreading the ball around. We're seeing a heavy dose of Hunter Henry. We're seeing Austin Hooper getting involved too as a tight end. But then we're seeing Kayshawn Booty and we're seeing Kendrick Bourne. But Demario Douglas, I think, if you start looking at the talent level in this wide receiver room in New England, I think Demario Douglas is the best wide receiver there. He was second on the team in targets behind only Hunter Henry last week, averaging 7 targets per game over the last 4 weeks. And we've seen his snaps go up now for 3 straight weeks. It was kind of weird. We were talking about it a few weeks ago where Kayshawn Boutte was the only full time receiver there, and everybody else was kind of in this rotation. Now that Kendrick Bourne is back in there, his snap share is growing. Demario Douglas is growing as well, and Kayshawn Boutte is the one that's kind of fallen by the wayside here. So I don't know if Demario Douglas is a guy that you can pick up and confidently put in your lineups, next week or the week after. But as Drake May continues to look better and better, and as Demario Douglas's role continues to grow, I think he's worth a stash. And if we see him string together a couple of nice weeks, he might be a guy that you can rely on in the fantasy playoffs.
Demario Douglas is one of these guys that I don't know that he's good enough to be on rosters. He's good enough to be a spot starter on a fantasy team, but he's not good enough to be rostered in every single league. And I
Yeah,
think that's why he continues to just be a guy that we talk about so often here. And Drake May's got the goods. He's got the goods. I just don't know that this Patriots team has got the goods. And Gerard Mayo may be one of the worst coaches in the league right now. It seems like he just doesn't want to do anything that's really indicative of a coach that wants to take chances and really fight for games. And that's sort of an annoying thing when you've got a player. eh, I'm actually getting frustrated because we see guys with talent. I'm not a Patriots. I'm a Dolphins fan. Like, so it's weird
mhm,
that I'm frustrated for the Patriots because I do see some really talented players, and to see how they ended up playing this past weekend against Miami, it's frustrating. I think that the team will have a very good future going forward, and I think Demario Douglas ends up being one of these guys that's like a wide receiver 4 flex play if you're in one of these deeper leagues. But I get worried that I don't know that we're going to have anyone on this Patriots roster that's worth starting. And in
Hunter
many
Henry.
ways, sure,
That's
he's
about
not that
it.
exciting.
Yeah.
Like, he's not even that exciting. Like,
He gives you a
I'm
decent
not
floor. He gets,
excited.
like, 8 targets a week and occasionally falls into the end zone, and that's, like, the highlight in this offense, and it's literally just because Drake May spreads the ball. I mean, like,
Yeah.
some games here in New England where, like, 10 or 11 guys are catching passes. Like, Drake May will throw to anybody and everybody in a Patriots uniform.
Do you even want to start the running backs? I know how crazy that might sound with how bad the
Antonio
running back
Gibson looked
situation
better
is,
than
but
Ramadre yesterday.
that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to start anyone from this team, and I'm not like poo-pooing this pick here because it is one of the better waiver wire options this week. But I think that speaks volumes about the waiver wire itself.
To
Is
be
that some
honest,
of
I
the
just
best
didn't wanna
players?
talk about the same handcuff running backs that we talk about every single
Yeah,
week. I'm just trying to think outside the box here.
same,
Yeah.
same. That leads me to my pick here. Noah Brown, wide receiver for the Washington Commanders. It's hard for me to sit here on a soapbox and get really excited for Noah Brown, but hey, he had a season high in receptions for him with 6. He had 9 targets this last week, leading the team in targets actually over the last 4 games. And despite the fact that the Commanders haven't been very good and they keep losing games, which is super weird, Noah Brown is a big part of this offense now, and they've actually got a pretty good fantasy playoff schedule going forward. So I can see some good shootout games there where Noah Brown is going to be getting plenty of targets. And they've Commanders, good team or bad team?
Uh,
In between?
yeah. I
I
mean,
feel like they play down to their competition. It's like a classic Cliff Kingsbury offense that they're really good to start the season. They get really bad later in the season, and they play down to their competition often.
we talked about that a lot last week. Yeah, like is Cliff Kingsbury just a first half of the season fraud? And I mean, it certainly feels that way. I saw Ian Hartitz this morning shared the EPA, the yards, and the points scored by month that Cliff Kingsbury's had, and it just trends down every single month throughout his career. I mean, it's not a shock. I think people are aware of that by now. I think had there not been that huge Terry McLaurin touchdown at the end of the game, we'd be having a very different conversation about the Commanders. I mean, losing to the Cooper Rush led Cowboys is pretty embarrassing. I don't know. I don't know if I'm willing to say they're a good team. I think Jaden Daniels is good, and they've got some good pieces on that offense, but there's just something missing. I haven't gone back and rewatched that game yet. I'm going to as soon as we're done recording here. There's just something a little bit off about the Commanders, and I can't put a finger on it.
It's so for Cliff, it's often a lack of creativity.
Yeah,
You know the thing where like he doesn't move his wide receiver one from the left side. He just always plays on the left side, and it's just not that not that teams don't know this, because if we know this here talking fantasy football, I'm sure NFL defensive coordinators know it. But I think that it's just once you can hone in on the tendencies, and Cliff doesn't seem to be a guy that wants to change. I don't know if you heard the interview, but a reporter in Washington actually asked him about it. Do you plan on revamping the offense, because traditionally your offensive numbers do get worse? It's a trend as the season goes on. He's like, I'm not aware of that trend, and we're not really making any changes.
come
So
on, come on, Cliff. You're not living under a rock, you know.
it's nuts. It's not like there's a reason you're not a head coach anymore, dude.
Right. So here, I'll read this. Rich Rebar pulled this this morning, and this is crazy. Terry McLaurin has run 27 routes on the right side of the field, either in the slot or out wide. 27 routes, and he's pulled 8 targets. That's a 30% target rate, which is elite. He has caught 7 of those 8 targets for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. Only 27 routes on that side of the field. Like, the average NFL player is running somewhere between like 4 and 500 routes per year. Terry McLaurin has run 27 on the right side of the offense and has put up his best numbers over there. It is bizarre. So bizarre that Cliff Kingsbury will just is this set in his ways.
I wonder if the Commanders have a like breakdown, which I don't think they will, just because Jade Daniels is good enough. I do wonder if Cliff Kingsbury is back there, even if they don't. Like, I wonder if he's back there again next season. It's kind of interesting. We're
Yeah.
talking out of both sides of our mouth here, because we keep saying like, go pick up this guy, but also everything around this player sucks. It's just the NFL is kind of in a weird spot right now, or at least fantasy football is in a weird spot right now with waivers this week.
Yeah, it is. And Noah Brown, I mean, the usage has been there. I believe
Yeah,
didn't he had more targets than McLaurin yesterday,
nine
right?
nine targets,
Yeah,
9 targets. He's got. So over the last 4 games, he leads the team in targets, and it's 10 more than Terry McLaurin.
that's
Like
crazy.
I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here. He is the alpha wide receiver on the team right now with Jaden Daniels. And outside of that massive play to Terry McLaurin at the end of the game yesterday, the numbers would heavily favor Noah Brown in all categories. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, again, and I mean, it's so much like Demario Douglas. Like the numbers tell us to pick him up and put him on your roster, but like, would you ever feel good putting Noah Brown in your lineup?
Oh, wow. It's got one of those like distorted like circuit mirrors, convertible mirrors, where when you look one way you're good, and then you kind of like turn to the side, and all of a sudden
Yeah,
you big fat ass like that. That's kind of what the Commanders are
yeah.
right now. It's like it looks good, and then you turn and you're like, oh no, it's not. No, it's not.
Let's get
All right.
back on track and talk about
Yep.
the waiver wire guys that I actually want to pick up rather than forcing
Yes.
these wide receivers that I don't feel good about.
Let's go for it. Next pick.
I don't have a ton to say about Kenneth Gainwell. He's available in 95% of leagues. Like that's
I love
it.
it. Let's get back on track and talk about the players we want. I don't have a lot to say about this guy though.
I mean, we know what it is. If
Yeah.
Saquon gets injured, he's going to be the lead running back on one of the best offenses in the league. And I don't think Kenneth Gainwell is going to be running for 302 yards and 3 touchdowns, whatever he did last night. He's not going to give you 1-to-1 replacement for Saquon Barkley, but 95% of leagues he's available in. That's kind of crazy to me. We roster all these other handcuffs. I don't know why nobody wants anything to do with Kenneth Gainwell. That's all I got.
It's and you know what? Like, let's just do this. Let's just preach the gospel of handcuff running backs right now. Anyways, any any running back that is the clear cut backup to a star running back in the NFL right now, even if they do have a role, just if you see him out there on your waiver wire, do your best to stash them.
Yep.
Start collecting these players, man. Like just collect them, add them to your bench. You should be good. You should be good going forward. There's no reason for guys like Blake Corum, Kenneth Gainwell, Tyler Algier, all these different players to be out on the waiver wire. Get them
Blake
all. I just want
Corum,
to see
like,
that
why
PSA.
is Kyron Williams like? Never. We don't have to have this conversation again.
Do it, Dave. Let the intrusive thoughts win. Let the bad thoughts win. There's two wolves
Kyron
inside you,
Williams
Dave.
is Kyron Williams is like the only running back in the NFL that could just have a goal line fumble and have a wildly talented rookie behind him, and the head coach is just like, "All right, Kyron, go back out there and get him again." Like the guy, like it's like, don't get me wrong. I learned from my lesson last year. I drafted Kyron Williams in a ton of leagues. I've got him, but like it just feels like such a scam that Kyron Williams just keeps producing week after week after week. Um, I don't know, man. This offseason, I'm gonna be riding the Blake Corum train pretty hard.
All right. Uh, I don't know. I have nothing to say to that. I have nothing to say to that. Let's
It's
go to the next pick.
frustrating to watch. Yeah, let's go
I
to the
know.
next one.
I know. I just, yeah, next pick here. I'm going to go with Devaughn Vele. I mentioned him earlier on in the season. He's wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. He's available in 95% of leagues, Dave. And he's actually been a top 24 fantasy wide receiver in 2 of the last 3 weeks. And we're seeing it's interesting because I think what we're seeing right now is that we're seeing that a lot of the players that we haven't cared about that have been on offenses that weren't good to start the year are becoming valuable. Or it's also, stay with me here, these offenses that haven't been good have allowed us to have these players that are now accessible. And that's what it is. It's Devaughn Vele has not been bad for fantasy, but he's on the Broncos and no one cares about the Broncos and no one really like knows Devaughn Vele. So he's available in 95% of leagues just because that's how fantasy football works. People want to go for the names they recognize. Like I'm sure there are more people rostering Odell Beckham Jr. on the Dolphins right now than Devaughn Vele.
Should it
Actually,
be?
once I finish this, I'm going to look that up because now I'm curious. But Vele has been a top 24 wide receiver in 2 of the last 3 weeks. He had a season high 9 targets this past week. Great matchup next week going up against the Cleveland Browns, and one of the best fantasy strength of schedules going forward at the wide receiver spot. Bo Nix has been awesome lately. Like I mentioned before, he might be the offensive rookie of the year. And that's listen, I'll be eating some crow because early in the season he did not look good, and I sat here and said that was a wasted pick by the Broncos. But man, it just took some time. It took some time, and the Broncos look great. Bo Nix looks great. The passing offense looks great. Cortland Sutton is like a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy right now. It's
The last
just
5 weeks, I think he's like top 3. Like he's been
yeah.
crushing it over the last
I gave
month or so.
I gave myself more wiggle room there just in case I was wrong. But yeah, it's been nuts. It's been nuts for the Broncos, Dave.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to it. I mean, Devaughn Vele seems to be the clear-cut wide receiver too. We do talk about clean and dirty offenses. Shout out Jeff Bell, and they are a dirty offense. We're going to see random games where it's just like, oh, Adam Troutman is our number 2 option today, and oh, that guy Javonte Williams, yeah, he's on the bench, and we're going to let Audric Estime run wild. It's tough to know on a weekly basis what we're getting, but Devaughn Vele has strung together some nice games. He appears to be the wide receiver 2 here, and yeah, I just looked it up, Alfredo. Since week 8, the last 5 weeks, there was only one player scoring more points than Cortland Sutton, and it's Jamar Chase.
Nuts.
Crazy,
Absolutely nuts. By the
crazy,
way, I just looked it up. Devaughn Vele, I said, is available in 95% of leagues. Odell Beckham Jr. available in 96% of leagues. There's no
disgusting.
reason that these two should be this similarly rostered.
Yeah, yeah,
Come on, fantasy
that's
managers.
crazy.
Let's do it. All right,
Happy
Dave,
for
go to your next
Cortland
pick.
Sutton too. I've been a big Cortland Sutton guy for years, and I can
Mhm.
finally take my victory lap now on what, year 6. You're finally there.
On a
All
run.
right,
Early.
last guy we'll talk about, Sean Tucker. And this is, obviously a handcuff, a guy who probably needs an injury to be fully unleashed. But we might have seen a change here. You know how we were talking a few weeks ago about how Cam Akers kind of took the RB2 job from Ty Chandler? I think that's happening here. I think Sean Tucker took the RB2 job from Rashad White at the end of the game. Rashad White had more touches, but so much of that came in garbage time late in the game when it was already out of control going into halftime. Sean Tucker had more touches than Rashad White, and he was getting all of the goal line work. And we heard this week leading up to week 12 that Todd Bowles said that he wanted to get him more involved, and He did. All three running backs were able to find the end zone, so they were all productive. I think Bucky Irving is the clear RB1 here. I think Sean Tucker has done enough to jump up to RB2. And Rashad White, a guy that I just talked about last week, a guy that I thought would still maintain those high value touches. He lost a lot of high value touches. The other guys were involved in the passing game. Sean Tucker was involved at the goal line, and now I'm starting to panic about Rashad White. So Sean Tucker is still available in 96% of leagues or something like that. Go out and pick him up because I think he's the number two here in Tampa.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as their running back room as ones to stash for the fantasy playoffs. And I still think there's going to be value in all of them. But Dave, what you said is right. Is like now seeing the trend with Rashad White, it's super concerning for fantasy managers because this is coming out of the bye week. And this is usually when teams want to deploy the strategy that they want to use for the rest of the year. And having such an easy fantasy schedule going forward for running backs, and they're saying, let's give Sean Tucker plays at the goal line, which by the way, he fumbled the second one. So I don't know how much
And
it's
they
going
went
to
right
change
back
things
to him,
going
right?
forward. Did they? Did they? I didn't see all of it. I did see the play with. See now we just look foolish. Now we look foolish. Someone will let us know in the comments. But I did see the fumble there. Listen, it's either way you slice it, it's concerning for Rashad White. Bucky Irving looks like the absolute win out of this backfield, and this is something we talked about earlier on in the year. Those players that you're picking up in week 1, week 2, week 3, those are the ones that end up giving you the absolute most value. Not just because they're playing the most games, but because those are the players that teams are willing to turn to early into this in the season.
Mhm.
So Bucky Irving, man, he looks like he ends up being probably the waiver wire pickup of the year.
Sure does. I mean, he looked amazing yesterday, and I love that one play. I'm sure you saw it making the rounds where Baker Mayfield was like 50 yards
Yes.
downfield as the lead blocker for Bucky Irving. Dude, I remember talking about it last year where we were, very much so excited about the resurgence of Baker Mayfield. I think he's my favorite player in the league right now. Like, I don't know if there's a guy I like more than Baker Mayfield. Like the celebration after the touchdown, the getting out there and blocking guys downfield. Like he is just off the charts aura right now. Baker Mayfield is just so much fun to watch.
He's having probably the most fun of any, and the vibes around his team kind of are like they're not the vibes, but just the circumstances in which his team is going through right now, where they
Mhm.
had lost Mike Evans, he's back, and then Chris Godwin being out, and your starting running back really hasn't been that good, but now you have these other guys. Everything's just going great for Baker, man. You know what I think it is, Dave? Is I think that there are these quarterbacks that are just simply appreciative to have the roles that they have
Yeah.
right now. I think we're seeing that with guys like Baker, guys like Geno. Bryce Young is back and he's playing some good football. I mean, it's not crazy to think that there is actually an intangible part of football where these players are just really, really grateful for the roles that they have.
I'll say rookie contracts aside, I'm just going to throw something totally not fantasy related out there. Could you name 5 quarterbacks that you'd rather build an NFL franchise around? I mean, it's like Mahomes, Herbert, Lamar, Allen, Burrow, and then I think Baker, like, might be that good. Like, this is 2 years now that we've seen him, like, whether he has his playmakers or he doesn't, he's playing great football, he's winning games. I think there's still just, like, kind of this weird taste in everybody's mouth with Baker because of what we saw in Cleveland and then Carolina, and then, I think people kinda have this idea that he was a number 1 overall pick bust, turned into a journeyman, but what we've seen over the last 2 years, like, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah. I mean, he has been. I'm looking right now at what quarterbacks I would build instead of Baker.
Like, sure,
I don't
maybe
think
like Caleb and Jaden Daniels, some
Yeah,
of the
I think
really
he's top
young
10 though.
guys, but
I think
yeah,
he's
top
still in the
10.
top 10 though,
Yeah.
which is kind of nuts to say considering where Baker Mayfield's career trajectory was going. It's just great. It's just great.
3
Just the
years ago, there
vibes
were
of
people
football in
saying
general.
that, like, with a straight face that Baker Mayfield isn't an NFL level quarterback, and now we're talking about him as a top 5, top 10 quarterback. It's crazy. Good
I'm
for
here
him.
for watching the I'm here for like the character arc of these guys where they get the failure in act 1, they eat their vegetables, they work hard, they come back, they do their Rocky montage training scene, they come back and they're just having the best time. Like I'm
Will
in on
Levis
it. I love that.
Will Levis, Bryce
Okay,
Young, Anthony
we'll see how that goes.
Richardson. We've seen it from all those guys this year where they, got benched for a few games and then came back and have kinda looked good after their benching.
Not you, Trevor Lawrence. All
No.
right. My last pick here is going to be a guy that, listen, just kind of like Amir Abdullah last week, where he was available in 99% of leagues, gets an opportunity due to injury. That might happen here for Jeremy McNichols of the Washington Commanders. Austin Eckler took a really bad hit where I was FaceTiming with some of my high school buddies that we still watch the games together oftentimes, and one of my buddies was looking at the Commanders game, and he goes, "Oh my god, who was that? He's down. This looks bad." And it was a few minutes until he got back up. But Austin Eckler took a massive hit. He looked very wobbly and woozy coming off the field. I'm sure there's going to be concussion protocol. I haven't seen reports of anything else coming out just yet, but
No.
it wouldn't surprise me if we don't see him in this upcoming week. And Eckler was carving out a very big role for himself in the absence of Brian Robinson Jr. And then now with Brian Robinson Jr. back, that Eckler role is still very, very big. 63% of the snaps. I mean, he was still getting all of his targets out of the backfield. He was getting goal line touches too. Like this was
Brian Robinson got hurt yesterday too, and he was able to return, but Brian Robinson left the game for an extended period, and this might be one of those situations. Like if you see it, like his
yeah.
foot got twisted backwards, and then he was bent over a defender, and his leg was twisted and contorted. That might have been one of those where they just, shot him up with something and sent him back out there to finish the game, and a little bit of drugs and a lot of adrenaline got him through the game. But now it might settle in today. So I mean, realistically, it's not crazy to think that there might be no Brian Robinson or Austin Eckler next week.
Similar situation with Amir Abdullah this past week, where
Yep.
you don't have Madison or Zamir White. So, not that Jeremy McNichols is some like otherworldly talent, but he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. We've seen that the Commanders have been trying to use him as the season has gone on. I'm not saying this is a guy you need to go out and spend a bunch of fab on, or that he's going to be a weekly starter from here on out, but this could be a guy who ends up being a desperation play, a borderline running back three type of player if he ends up having the starting role for the Commanders. They do have a tough matchup going up against Tennessee, so it's not exactly
Yeah.
ideal. But if you are desperate at the
I mean,
running back
Tennessee
spot,
just clamped Joe Mixon.
I
That's
know,
they've got a good run
I know.
defense.
Yeah, I mean, what you're hoping for there is that Jaden Daniels is going to open things up a bit more for that offense going against Tennessee, and make them have to spread out their defense a bit more. But yeah, this is like I said, this is desperation. I think the most I would drop of fab on him is going to be a single
3.
percentage. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, go three. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. It depends on the desperation. I think three would be my max. That would be me if I'm looking at this.
It's a sharp move though, because official first practice reports don't come out until Wednesday, and if on Wednesday we get a report that Washington that Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson are both DNPs, did not practice, then everybody's going to run to the waiver wire and try to
Right.
pick up Jeremy McNichols. So pick him up now for free. Like yeah, I say 3%. Realistically, in most leagues, you probably don't even need to put a bid on him. You can just put in a claim and pick him up for free, and then just get 2 days ahead because that's exactly what will happen. So sharp move. I like that one, Alfredo. Yeah, get ahead of everyone
Thanks.
else and just pick up McNichols now.
This is a weird time of year, giving each other compliments and saying nice things. I like it. You should cut yourself more off. Don't say that, Alfredo. Never mind, because you cut your finger. And then as
Oh,
I was saying it, I realized how bad it sounded.
yeah.
Never
I
mind.
was wondering
Spill,
where you were going with that
spill
one. Yeah.
coffee on yourself more often. There we
Oh,
go. All
all
right.
right.
Let's go. Cut that out, Julia, please. Let's go to the other players to consider here. Some names that we didn't put on the list, and it's a good time to have a hyphenated name in the NFL. Nick Westbrook Akine, Marquez
Nope.
Valdez Scantling.
Nope.
Just a bunch of no from Dave. Noah Gray, may I
No.
interest you in
No.
any of
Gray
that?
Kelsey. No.
Noah, okay. We'll say it again then. Every single handcuff running
There you
back that
go.
you can get your hands on, those are the other players to consider here.
How does
There's
Nick
some of
Westbrook
those,
Akine have 6 touchdowns in the last 7 games, Alfredo? What is happening?
it's like it's like 6 touchdowns with 7 catches. And it
It's
just keeps
insane.
happening. It just keeps happening
Insane. Yeah.
over and over. Also, the if you're needing to stream quarterbacks, Jameis Winston, Drake May, these are guys that give you a fighting chance each week. So those are some other players to consider there. Dave, we haven't done this before, but now as we're getting closer to the fantasy playoffs, I wanted to throw in some defenses, some DSTs here that do make a little bit of sense for people. And a lot of these, I mean, two of these were already picked up by so many people because of the matchups they had this week, but the Buccaneers defense and the Commanders defense both already had some good matchups. So if you already have them on your roster, this is not the week or the time to drop them to go pick up anything else. Hold on to these defenses because they have some pretty good playoff schedules going forward. They've been productive throughout the season. And then if you are really desperate, I'm talking you're in one of those leagues where everyone has already stashed 2 or 3 defenses in preparation for the fantasy playoffs. That's what I used to do all the time with my buddies in my home league, is go and stash 3, 4 defenses. I was that guy. But the Jacksonville Jaguars defense is not bad. Not bad here because if you take a look at their games, where they really struggles is when they went up against good offenses. And towards the end of the season here, the fantasy playoffs, they're not going to be going up against a lot of good offenses. So they can give you a very solid 8 or 9 points. They do have some double digit fantasy point outputs there. So this is if you really need a streaming defense, Dave.
Yeah, and I think with the Bucks, week 15 is the one that jumps out to me as being a little bit scary,
Mhm.
where they have to face off against the Chargers. So I think you can look at the week 15 schedule and start trying to plan a little bit ahead if you want to do that. The Chiefs probably aren't available, but Chiefs going up against the Browns and Jameis Winston, that's always a nice matchup. Bengals taking on the Titans, that could be a good matchup as well in week 15. But you look at the Bucks, next week they have the Panthers. The week after that, they have the Raiders. Then they've got that tough matchup against the Chargers. And then they've got the Cooper Rush led Cowboys, and then they've got the Panthers again. So 4 of their next 5 matchups are just plug and play without even thinking twice. And then just look at the week 15 schedule, see what other teams are available. But I think if you could pick up the Bucks now and then a streaming option for week 15, you don't have to think about defense again for the rest of the season.
I love it. I love it. Well, Dave, that's going to do it for us. That's
Did
going
it?
to do it for us here today. Guys, I want to remind everybody we've got an awesome Black Friday sale going on right now where you're going to get 20% off your Football Guys membership for the year. It's Thanksgiving week, so we're also not going to be here on Thursday, and that's what reminded me. We've got our Black Friday sale. You can get some awesome merchandise from the merch store, like Dave's hat that he's wearing right there. Look at how handsome he looks in his hat. And then 20% off. Listen, we know you're going to be a Football Guys subscriber. Anyways, you're already doing it. You're watching the show. You're using the tools. We're revamping our site. We're going to have some awesome new player pages there. It's going to give you some incredible insight. We're really excited for it. So get ahead of it. Just like your waiver wire, get ahead of it. Sign up now, 20% off with the Black Friday sale. And Dave, like I mentioned, it is Thanksgiving week. We're not going to be here on Thursday, Thanksgiving. We're going to go celebrate with our families. That means no starts of the week this week, no starts and streamers. But
But,
but
but,
but the Sunday morning live start sit show with Joey Wright, Jagger May, Jeff Bell, Adam Hutchinson, and the entire Football Guys crew is going to be there for you. So if you are waiting for that Thursday show, you want Alfredo and Dave, we're not going to be there for you.
but,
But we've got some great people that are going to fill in for us and give you all the advice you need on Sunday morning. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. It's been a pleasure to be with you guys this season, and we'll be back again tomorrow with our audio only version of the show, the Week 13 Vibes Check. Yeah, it's going to be a good one. As always, thanks for watching and listening. We'll see you next time. Adios.